Honest with you, Netflix doesn't offer the right amount of good series that you can watch from. So there are some websites that I can navigate in.
Okay.
I can say I can watch movies there.
So let's have a look now how Nestor is doing after part 1. Okay, first of all, fluency. Well, I think he speaks very fluently, right? He has these very long turns and only occasional self-correction, once or twice. I think also he's using a range of connectors, although I do notice there's a bit of repetition with the phrase "I would have to say." He overuses that a little bit, but by and large, his fluency is great. I think he's up there at a band 8 level of fluency for me. Vocabulary. Well, vocabulary. He does use a range of vocabulary to discuss all the topics, right? We talked about his hometown, about movies, and he does that with some precision. And I think he has a strong awareness of style and collocation, right? It turns out that, or any particular favorite kind of movie, very nice collocations and language. One or two inappropriacies or mistakes. He said proud about instead of proud of, and to change ideas rather than exchange ideas. But for me, vocabulary, at least a 7, and I'll be listening for the potential to go up to an 8. Grammar, I thought was very, very good. I mean, he's using a very wide range of structures and with quite a bit of flexibility. I mean, for a part 1, it is difficult to show off a high range of grammar, but he's using future continuous tenses, and he has these multiple clause sentences or utterances. So lots of sentences with lots of clauses and even embedded clauses, which give it a really rich, complex structures put together. I mean, a rich level of grammar, right? I mean, for instance, he says, for example, nowadays, we have the dilemma of social networks where they are talking about what is going on with your cell phone and the networks and how social networks are attracting you in order for you to start consuming the things that are on the social networks. Long sentences with all these multiple clauses. I mean, really, really nice. So for me, his grammar, probably going to be an 8. I'll be listening out to see if he gets up to the level 8, but certainly on the way, despite 1 or 2 mistakes, right? I mean, he says, I don't want to sounds like, instead of I don't want to sound like. So there was a fault with the S, but it wasn't a persistent mistake. It was just a one-off. So I think he's great. Grammar's very good. Likewise, pronunciation. What about my pronunciation? Keith, pronunciation. I thought he was an 8. I thought he was easy to understand throughout, and he's using a wide range of pronunciation features, such as sentence stress, word stress, connected speech, intonation patterns were spot on, and over long sentences as well. I think there was one word I didn't catch, but it wasn't a big problem at the moment. So for me, he's certainly up at the 7 and 8, and I'm feeling he's definitely online for an 8. But let's see how he does in part 2 and 3.
To do different kind of researches that will help now other countries to face, right, the situation against this pandemic. It turns out that the more informed a country is and the more they share the information they have been able to found, that cooperation will be even better, right? And basically.
Okay, we'll stop here. That's the end of the speaking test. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And now the moment of truth. Let's see how Nestor did after part 2 and part 3. Did he move up? And where did he move up to? Well, fluency first. I think he's at the 8 level, probably a strong 8. I mean, he speaks fluently. The long turns with occasional self-repetition, even at a band 8, you can have some self-repetition, just a little bit. What I liked was that he's developing his topics coherently. which is essential for that fluency. You know, he's in part 3, he's giving his opinion, he's giving why, and giving examples with nice connectors all the way through. My only hesitation was that there is a noticeable repetition of, I would have to say, that connector, right? Which is a shame. My suggestion is to keep on top of that. I mean, really control that to make sure he's using a wider range. But I think certainly an 8 for fluency. Vocabulary, well, a wide range, used flexibly and mostly with precision. He is using some less common and idiomatic vocabulary, things like move on with your career, get back on track. I would like to see more. I think this is an area he can develop. I think probably his vocabulary is around the 8 level, but I think he does need to develop it. I felt in part 3, to get the band 9 level, I think he needs to be using a wider range of vocabulary without effort and really precisely to dig deep into those topics. But I still think he's a band 8. He uses paraphrase effectively, which is essential for a band 7, 8, and 9. You must paraphrase correctly, which is where when you want to say something and you can't find the right word and you find a way round it, right? He talks about the equations from his maths teacher, some kind of equations, and he can't remember the name. And he says that I don't quite remember the name right now. So he finds a way round of using, not saying what kind of equations, but to explain it. And that was nice. He did that a couple of times. Yes, there were some inappropriacies or mistakes, but not many. It's a scare me instead of it scares me. I think he was thinking of awake, afraid, a scare, but it's scare, but very few. So vocabulary, nice. I would say 8. And the same for grammar. I think he's also at the 8. He continues to use complex sentences, continuous tenses, perfect aspect, multiple clause sentences. There are some mistakes still there with the S in plurals and the third person S. There's a few confusions, but not so many. I think overall, I would still give an 8 for grammar. Pronunciation, I was wondering, was it an 8 or a 9? Because I thought he was so easy to understand throughout. I was impressed with the intonation patterns over long utterances. There were 2 or 3 areas I didn't quite catch the word. There's a confusion with trick and tricky or trickist, and I wasn't completely clear. And I think maybe that stops him being a 9, but I would put him at a band 8. So overall, I think an excellent band 8. Well done, Nestor. Well, what about my advice then? My advice to Nestor would be the following. First of all, for fluency, be careful of the repetitive cohesive features or using the same connectors. Try and expand. Be careful really with the I would have to say, which is overused far too much. So to make sure you're integrating and using different connectors. Number 2, build your vocabulary. I think there's a very strong vocabulary there, but it needs expanding so you can use it with more precision and you can use less common and idiomatic vocabulary with perfection and precision. So I think lots of practice on just building up the vocabulary there. Number 3, I would say for your grammar, just be aware of the S on plurals and the third person. There's sometimes it's omitted, it's used on the wrong word sometimes. There's a slip now and again, but just get on top of that. And I think that will really help get your grammar even stronger. So those are my tips. Let's go on to have a listen to some ideas, well, in a discussion with myself and Nestor about learning English, about the IELTS test, and Nestor's tips for the rest of you to get up to that band 8 and band 9 level.
I'm sorry, being the fact that I need to work on vocabulary, and you know that the vocabulary that, for example, for part three questions, is not easy to talk with people that have the same level of you in English, right? What do you think is going to be the best way for me to say, okay, let me go ahead and learn more vocabulary? So for me to,
it's a challenge. I think there are several things to think about when it comes to learning vocabulary. One of them is think about your passive and your active vocabulary. Now, you've probably got a lot of passive vocabulary, right? That you've read about, you've heard, but that you're not used to using. I would first of all focus on that passive vocabulary. So don't worry too much about learning new words, but look at the words that you can kind of recognize and see, and start focusing on activating them. The challenge is that you hit the nail on the head. When you said, I need to be speaking with people of a similar level in order to be developing that, it's absolutely right. I mean, if you've got a speaking partner who's a band 7, they're not going to challenge you as much. But if you can find somebody of a really high level and take, for example, I would suggest you take some unusual reading material, like from a scientific journal, or from a newspaper, or from, I mean, we talked about science, but maybe it's about sport, like a sports magazine or a gym magazine, and you take an article that's interesting that you've read. And again, don't focus on learning all the new vocabulary, but focus on talking about that article. So you've read an article on, on the coronavirus and the development of the virus. Put that down and then practice either with a partner or even by yourself, summarizing it, repeating it, talking about it again and again. So you're actively speaking out the words and the kind of language you need when you're discussing it. And you'll find as you're speaking, you go, oh, what was that word? And you go back, oh, asymptomatic, that's the word. And then you put that into a sentence and you start activating that word that you'd recognized, but you hadn't actually started speaking. So talking about a wide range of articles that you can read, or it could be podcasts that you've listened to, podcasts on politics or government, international cooperation, the Olympic Games, whatever, and speaking to somebody, or you could do it on your own, summarizing it and talking about it, so that you're effectively activating this higher level, diverse vocabulary from a wide range of different topics. And I think that would be my number one thing to focus on.
How to move from one band to the other one? What would be the process, and how much do you think is going to take time? How much do you think it's going to take in order for me to that higher level, to the next point?
Good question. From a band 8 to a band 9 is the biggest gap of all. It's a huge gap that takes a long time, because a band 9 is effectively a proficient, similar to native speaker level. I think one thing to do is to be very, very clear about the gaps. So I would go to the band descriptors, and this is what I keep looking at. I am sure you've seen these. This is what I have on my desk in front of me, is share. The band descriptors is to go through and just be very, very clear about what you've got right and what not. So, for example, it talks about fluency and coherence. Speaks fluently with only rare repetition or self-correction. Rare repetition or self-correction. So if you're recording yourself and you're hearing yourself repeat or correct yourself more than once or twice, then that's something to work on. The next one, any hesitation is content related rather than finding words. So again, if you find in a conversation you're looking for the right word in English, then that's going to stop you getting a 9. So you need to be, it's not something you can fix with a trick. It's like just continuous practice to build up that level. But I think using the band descriptors as your guide to say, this is where the gaps are. It's this one, and this one. For example, lexical resource, I mentioned, the second one, uses idiomatic language naturally and accurately, still needs a little bit of work. So I think that's one thing. I would take the band descriptors as my guide, to say that's what I need to work on. But then it really is, it's not so much, there's a bit of technique in the exam, but I think it's as much about your overall spoken English ability, right? I mean, when you're going from a 6 to a 7, there are clear things people can do to move up, but 8 to a 9, it's like saying, how do I become a native speaker? It took me about, to be a native speaker, about 18 years to be a fluent, articulate, educated native speaker. I mean, it takes time, but yeah, I would use the band descriptors as a guide. What tips do you have for the listeners to help them prepare for IELTS?
Okay. I would have to say that I will give you like 3 main tips that have been working a lot in my situation. And the tip number 1, everybody, is that you have the opportunity to listen. Look, the more you listen, the better you become. Because when you were just a child, before you even start speaking, before you even reaching 3 years old, your parents were teaching you how to speak, right? So it's very important to listen to your favorite artist or actress or actor, right? And try to mimic the way they speak. So you are, in that way, you are improving your fluency, you're improving your vocabulary, you're improving your pronunciation just by working on that part, right? Remember that when you are going to be taking an IELTS, you need to be aware of the structure of the exam. Try to put yourself in situations where you need to speak for 2 minutes or even more, right? The idea over here is not only to focus on those 2 minutes. For example, I'm referring to the part number 2. I'm talking about that part specifically, where you will have the opportunity to speak for at least 10 minutes. You grab a topic and try to develop that topic and try to speak as much as you can. Eventually, the examiner, at the moment of your IELTS examination, it will ask you to stop, and then you stop, no problem, right? But at least you reached that part of speaking, right? And obviously that will help you out. So there's not a magic formula, or there's not a tricky. It's just based on consistency, working on your fluency, pronunciation, vocabulary, grammar range, and coherence, right? My second advice is to please watch Keith videos, right? And I'm going to be honest with you. This is not like promoting Keith, but if you follow the first advice, which is listen, try to develop your listening skill. And if you listen to Keith how to speak, the way he actually responds to things, he can be your, let's see, your famous actor, right? And you can mimic the way he speaks. So you have just right there an example that you can follow that pattern in order for you to develop your fluency and the speaking skills that you need to work on. And my third advice, it's about practice. Find a person that is at least at your same level of speaking. We have different kind of bands, and the fact that if you find a person that says they speak English, you need to also understand, or you need to have like a quick assessment if this person actually knows more than you. Because if you go for those people who know more than you, then you will have that need of preparing yourself, and obviously to compete, right? You have that kind of internal competition that will help you out to move on, right? So it's very important practice, but it's very important to have smart practice. Because if you speak, let's say, if you spoke, let's say, with a lower band, that would be a little uncomfortable. You will feel like you are not moving forward in your skills. So to wrap up, number 1, listen. Remember that there are not tricky things. Number 2, listen to Keith video. They are extremely important, and they will help you out to improve your vocabulary, pronunciation, and everything related to the speaking part. And last but not least, practice, right? Practice your speaking, but smart speaking, smart practice, where you find a person that is at the same or a little bit higher than you, and you can learn from. Thank you.
Brilliant. Very, very coherently explained. Lovely, Nestor. Thank you very, very much. That was great. I'm sure that will be very useful for the students. Nice. So a big thank you for watching this video, and a big thank you to Nestor for doing this. Thank you, Nestor, very much. It was great fun to do the test with you. I hope this helps all of you see what you need to be at a band 8, and also what you need to jump up to the band 9 level as well. Great. If you're wondering, who is this? Well, my name's Keith, and I run the Keith Speaking Academy, which is here to help you speak better English, help you with your IELTS speaking, to get a higher score on the IELTS speaking test. I do have 2 online courses if you're interested in improving your speaking skills. There's the IELTS Speaking Success Get a Band 7 Plus, which is a complete preparation course for speaking. But if you want to focus on your fluency, I have the Fluency for IELTS Speaking, which is just focusing mainly on that skill set. And it's a really hard, intensive workout, but the rewards are great. Great. Thank you very much again for watching. If you've liked this, please do leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think. Share the video with your friends. Subscribe to YouTube and turn on that little notification button. I cannot wait to see you here again soon. Thank you very much again. Take care now. Bye-bye.